Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our international conference on data privacy and data protection. My name is Mindaugas Civilka. I'm TGS Baltics partner. I'm the host and moderator of this annual event. It's the largest event of its kind in the Baltics, and I'm really very proud to have it convened. First of all, I'm very proud, terrifically proud about my team, about TGS Baltics and Silvia, Ira and Sandra, as well as LDAPA, our partners, Lithuanian Data Protection Officers Association, who have managed to pitch terrific, the best speakers during such a short term. I'm also very proud that we have managed to defy the time zones and the time frames and time limitations. Today in the conference, we will have 8 different time zones. We'll have speakers from around the globe and spanning through basically eight time zones. Ironically enough, the pandemic made it possible. The pandemic made it possible to happen, and having such a beautiful and such a terrific panel, we most probably we wouldn't have if it's a physical event. Nevertheless, I hope that next year's event will take place physically, and we'll meet each other in person. Today's conference is dedicated to 2 main topics, which are basically very hot topics for the last year, and I not doubt that they will be hot topics beyond the year 2021. It's international data transfers and global data transfers and technology, and especially artificial intelligence and its impact on our daily life. Therefore, this conference will be divided into exactly 2 sessions. The first one will be moderated by myself. The second one will be moderated by my colleague Miglė Petkevičiūtė. I'm extremely proud to have the best of the best speakers, and participants are the best of the kind: practitioners, visionaries, academics, government officials, influencers, experts. And last year events and this week's events have showed us how privacy and data protection is important to everyone, to our business, to our society, and to us as citizens. And we have been forced to understand, once again, to think and realize that privacy is not for granted. Even if it's fundamental right, even if it's fundamental societal value, it's not for granted. Sometimes we can forget it. It's really easy to forget that privacy is so valuable for us, for our human nature, for us as individuals. Therefore, we, businesses, governments, and citizens must defend and protect it every day, because it's in our nature. And it's very easy to forget this, especially during turbulent times, especially during turmoils, especially during uneasy times. But it's exactly during these uneasy times when we must raise our awareness, when we must raise our values. And often we hear privacy is an obstacle to global trade, an obstacle to global business, an obstacle to pandemic management, an obstacle to companies. Really? Really, is it an obstacle? How human nature can be an obstacle? Without that, I mean, there is not that much what would matter at all. And pandemic will go away in one day. No, but our right to privacy, never, never. Therefore, we must realize that privacy is never an obstacle. It's always a protection. It's always a balance between different societal values, and it's always for better business, for better life, and for better society. My today's first guest is from Canada, Ontario. She's a former Information and Privacy Commissioner in Canada, Ontario, and Cavoukian. She has coined many important concepts in privacy narrative, but the most important one, the most notional one, and the most famous one she has coined is the privacy or privacy by design. So my pleasure to have her here today. In essence, we had made this conversation yesterday. We have shooted the video coverage yesterday, and because, well, today, right now, it's early morning or night in Ontario, Canada. But nevertheless, it was my pleasure to have her yesterday. And once again, I will listen to her and look at her once again with pleasure. My pleasure. Anne Cavoukian. Hello, it's my pleasure and honor to present the speaker, Anne Cavoukian, who is the former Information and Privacy Commissioner for the Canada province of Ontario. Her concept of privacy by design has become cornerstone of the privacy professional mentality. And basically, we can't talk about privacy by design without talking about Anne Cavoukian. She is also a mother of many other concepts, which are such as, for example, privacy as not a conflicting but cumulative value, which is also very important for privacy professionals. So basically, today I have really, once again, a pleasure to raise some of the questions I have. I also wanted to raise to her. We're shooting this discussion, this short interview in advance. It will be showed tomorrow during our conference live event, which is basically 12, more than 12 hours from now. And it will be early morning in Canada. But nevertheless, technology made it possible. The location is not important, but time is still important. We need to take into account, and the time zone differences make both opportunities and impacts on our life. So basically, Anne, why not to try to start from more broader concepts and more broader insights into what happened during what happened during 2020 and what will happen during the next year and the beyond yes. Your idea of preserving the privacy and other public goods, uh, public interest or business interest or win-win principle is also very notional, and promote it as also as a fundamental notion, and you always stress that it's not privacy versus or against security, it's not privacy against or versus marketing or advertising, it's privacy and marketing, privacy and advertising. So in this concept, in this context, I'm eager to ask you some kind of provoking question.
Okay.
How would you think it is possible to make this happen during pandemic? Management. We talk about COVID vaccination and the stuff like that. Where the privacy is in this kind of narrative now?
It's critical to discuss this in the context of the pandemic or any other emergencies, terrorist incidents. I'll take you back to 9/11, 2001. It was such a horrible time because everybody was so concerned, obviously, a huge terrorist incident. And the first thing that everybody said was, well, we have to forget about privacy. We have to look at public safety and security. And the problem is, whenever you do that, after the emergency is over, you don't return to the previous state of privacy. It becomes weakened as a result of that emergency. And that's what we have to make sure does not happen now with the pandemic. So when the pandemic started last year, I was very concerned that people were just saying, well, this is an emergency situation, COVID-19 pandemic. We can't worry about privacy. We have to take care of people's health and protect them. Of course we do, but not at the expense of privacy. You can do both. So that's why I have been working with companies like Apple and Google who have produced the Apple Google Exposure Notification app. It's brilliant. And I worked with our government here in Ontario, Canada, and we developed something called COVID Alert, which is a completely privacy protective exposure notification app based on the Apple Google framework. And Apple briefed me on this on 2 occasions, because I always say trust but verify. They took me through all the details. No information is shared with anyone. You are completely in control of your information. If you choose to download the app and then follow it, nobody else has access to this information unless you choose to share it. That's what privacy is all about. Privacy is all about personal control over the use and disclosure of your information. And just because there's a pandemic or emergency doesn't mean you throw privacy out the door. Privacy forms the foundation of our freedom. We have to preserve privacy and our freedom.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Absolutely, I'm with you on this passage. And basically, it's very interesting. How would you predict the government's will behave during this year. I mean, we are talking about possibilities to introduce the vaccination passporting or certification systems, and even more, some countries they talk about mandatory or obligatory vaccination. And when it comes to the company, to the employees, and the right to employment, the right to job, because we all know that more or less we will, I mean, live this kind of life, well, during next years. And what are your instincts as far as the privacy is concerned? What kind of path the government should take?
I don't trust government. I'll be very clear. We always have to ensure that a government, what they do is transparent, and we can examine what they're doing with our information. When I was Privacy Commissioner of Ontario, Canada, for 3 terms, 17 years, there was a different political party as the government in each of those terms. And before they became the government, they were very interested in privacy and protecting people's information. Once they became the government, all that changed. They want to control the data. They want to control people's personal information and take control over everything. No, we don't allow that. We have to watch what everything the government does, make sure that what they do is consistent with privacy laws and our expectations in terms of protection of data. Just because there is an emergency situation like a pandemic doesn't mean you give up your freedom and your privacy, because what will happen is the pandemic will come to an end. But what cannot happen is that our privacy comes to an end and our freedom. And that's what will happen because governments are taking over so much information. So we have to ensure total transparency on all of these. IATA is developing an IATA travel app. There's other kinds of apps that are coming into place. And they're all to, let people know that you've taken a COVID test or you've had a vaccine or something like that. That has to be your choice to disclose that to whoever you wish to do. So if you get a COVID test, great. It should be in your digital capability to control it, and then you can reveal it when you go to the airport if you need to fly somewhere, of course. So we can have digital techniques by which we can protect the data. There's something called a good health pass that I've been working with Evernym and others, and it's based completely on total control of privacy. The individual reveals whether they've had an app, whether they've had a test, a COVID test, whether they've had a vaccine, things of that nature. They reveal it. It's under their control. This cannot reside with the government.
Okay, but some companies, I mean, and businesses, they say, look, if the government does not, introduce the mandatory vaccination or mandatory testing, and it's left for our choice, then we as businesses, need to assess the risk, right, of requiring these kind of things. And for example, some companies already start asking, can we, for example, include in the employment contract the clause requiring the things which normally should be left as voluntary or as the option for the employee. So don't you think that without guidance from the countries, the companies will behave in different way, which would be even a greater mess?
There is certainly that risk. There's no question. And I'm not suggesting that people won't be required to do certain things like get a COVID test or a vaccine or whatever. What I'm saying is the response to that should be under the control of the data subject, the individual. So if I want to travel, I know I have to get a COVID test. So I'll go get a COVID test if I can travel in the future. But I want it to be under my control. So digitally, I can reveal that to the airport or to a company or whatever. If they say, you have to have a vaccine to work here, I think that's untenable. But if they say that, then it's my decision whether I wish to A, have a vaccine, and B, who I wish to reveal it to. So I'm not suggesting that these aren't real concerns, but I want the response to these to be under the control of the individual.
Okay, then and I would try then to go to the topic you love, exceptionally love. It's the privacy by design concept. And basically, I'm curious enough, what the situation is in US and Canada with privacy and design in action in life? What are the industries where this is already becoming not only a theory but a standard? Can you shed some examples?
Of course. Let me tell you. So I offer privacy by design certification in conjunction with KPMG, a world-renowned consulting firm. So what we do, and so many companies have come to me now to become certified for privacy by design. Why? Because there's such a trust deficit now. There's very little trust on the part of the public of either companies or governments. So companies that do privacy by design and have great respect for individuals say, we want them to know that we're doing this properly. So they come to me and they get certified they come to me and with their consent, I get KPMG to go to their offices and look under the hood, make sure that what they're doing in fact, complies with the 7 foundational principles of privacy by design. And if they sort of pass the test, so to speak, then they get certified. And then I tell them, shout this from the rooftops, put it on your website, tell everybody, because you should benefit. You gain a competitive advantage by offering very strong privacy to your customers. It gives them enormous respect for you. And companies have told me that they love it because they develop trusted business relationships with their customers that they didn't have before. So there are enormous benefits to doing privacy by design, and certification is one example of how you can show the public you're doing it right.
Okay, maybe you have some secret recipe of how to proceed or what to answer those businesses who pose some such kind of questions like, we are manufacturers, right? We are doing this for many years, and previously was never a headache, and now, I mean, how would we, intervene with our processes, which are like set forth like several years ago, or even maybe 10 years ago? It's impossible to start from now. And what are your suggestions? Is it possible to start privacy by design, let's say, from day one, from tomorrow, even if the process of manufacturing has begun, maybe even sometimes even decades ago?
So what I tell those companies is, don't worry. Obviously, it's ideal if you do it from day one, of course, but most companies haven't done that. So let's tackle the problem right now. What do you do right now? So I would send KPMG in, and they would look at what are the data collection practices that this manufacturing company engages in. Do they collect personally identifiable data on customers? If they do, then that's the data we have to protect. How can we protect it? How is the data used? To whom is it disclosed? So we're not trying to minimize their manufacturing efforts. We're trying to maximize manufacturing and privacy, because now, like in the last 2 years, concern for privacy is at an all-time high. All of the public opinion polls, Pew Internet Research and others, have found that concern for privacy is at the 90 percentile. 90% very concerned about their privacy. 92% concerned about loss of control over their information. So I tell the manufacturing company this information, and I say, let us shape what you're doing to enhance the privacy offering that you're delivering, and thereby build much greater trusted business relationships with your customers. They love it. It makes it a win-win.
Okay, but it's always interesting for me. Public polls always show that the privacy concern is among top priority, and it depends, of course, on the way you ask the question. But it's always up to 90% or 80 something. Yeah. But when it comes to the real behavior of the consumers, the trend is totally different. Nobody, well, of course, not nobody, but very small, proportion of consumers really go through privacy policies. Really small proportion of consumers really look into the terms and conditions and read the stuff like that. And isn't it that they say one thing, but they behave like, okay, data, I will. give away.
No, it's not, because you're placing the burden of protecting their privacy on them. You expect them to go and read through all the legalese in the terms of service and all the pages and pages in the privacy policy to find the opt-out box that says, do not use my personal information for any purpose other than the intended primary purpose of the data collection. Please, life is short. Nobody has hours to do that. But that doesn't mean that people don't care deeply about privacy. You can't put the burden on them to protect their privacy. It's on you, the company, the government who's collecting the personal information. That's why in privacy by design, the second foundational principle is privacy as the default setting, which means you as a company say to your customers, you don't have to worry about privacy. We give you privacy automatically. It's the default setting in our operations. We can only use your personal information for the primary purpose that you intended us to use it for and that you consented to. Beyond that, we can't use it for anything else. But if down the road, a secondary use arises that we would like to use your personal information for, we have to come back to you and seek your positive consent again for the secondary use. Customers love this. Companies that do privacy by design have told me that whenever they go back to get additional consent, they get it like this. Why? Because they built a trusted business relationship. Again, it's like win-win. So we can make this happen, but you can't put the burden on the customer. You, the company, have to accept responsibility for protecting privacy.
Okay, yes, and but how then you will how then you see the recent rivalry between Facebook and Apple on the privacy issues? Is it the marketing trick, or is it something deeper going on under the hoods?
I mean, come on, it's not a marketing trip. Apple is known for the lengths it goes to protect privacy. They've offered end-to-end encryption forever on their Apples, iPhones, etc. Facebook, you could engaged in the same kind of practices. So it's not surprising that there is this rivalry, and it's not surprising that Apple is saying, look, we've been doing this for years. End-to-end encryption, we stand by that.
So then would you predict that the social media business model, the way they behaved, where the data will change in the upcoming years dramatically?
And yes, and it is changing already. Google, I just read about it this morning, has introduced much stronger protections in terms of the privacy of their users. They've introduced, I forget what it's called, but look it up. They just announced it yesterday. It's brilliant. It's much stronger privacy protection, protecting your personal information, the personal data that you have on Google. So I am predicting that it's going in that direction. You're going to see stronger privacy offered by large companies because people are demanding it and walking away if you don't offer it. So I see this as very positive development. Again, win-win, not to the detriment of the company's business models, but to the advantage of their customers. Win-win.
And the last but not the least, the personal question I have, what was the most important thing that you learned as the privacy commissioner during your more than 20 years tenure?
Let me just preface this. When I first started as commissioner, and remember, I'm not a lawyer, I'm a psychologist. So what I brought to it was very different from my legal team that I had at the commission. That's why I created Privacy by Design, literally at my kitchen table over 3 nights. I wanted a proactive means of protecting privacy to prevent the privacy harms from arising, a model of prevention, not just deal with it after the fact and offer good remedies. To me, it's all about preventing the harms. So that's the most important messaging I can put out there. Be proactive, address the issues beforehand. Don't wait until something happens and then you try to fix it. You want to build trust, which you can do like no other by being proactive and have a preventative model. And communicating this, have transparency with your customers. Let them know what you're doing and the lengths you're going to protect their privacy. Again, that builds trust like no other. And in the existing trust deficit, that's what you need big time. We can do this. And things are going in that direction. Decentralized identity is becoming a really big thing. There's a decentralized identity foundation with all the big companies are in it, Microsoft, IBM, etc. They're looking to return control to the data subject, which is where it belongs.
Okay, thanks, Anne. It was Anne Cavoukian from Canada, Ontario, former Ontario's Information and Privacy Commissioner. Very nice to have you. A big pleasure
Oh,
and honor. We'll show you live tomorrow.
my
And
pleasure.
all the
Thank
best.
you for having me. Thank you.
All the best, Anne. Thanks
Thank
a
you.
lot.
Bye-bye.